Hi, it's Carolyn. I'm here to help you learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to decorate this 3D pig roast cake. And I will also let you know how much I charged. So let's get started. So I started by filling these two 9-inch cakes, and I did not torte those cakes. I baked them in 2-inch high pans, and I have this 8-inch dome cake, and I'm just leveling off the bottom of it. And then I do spray it with simple syrup. I didn't show that, but I have a video showing you how I make my simple syrup. I will link that below. And I'm getting some of this vanilla chocolate chip filling in there and sticking that little dome on top. And now for the head, that was the body. For the head, I'm doing 1 6-inch cake and I'm leveling off that top part. And then I'm leveling off the domed 6-inch as well. And I will link all of the pans that I use below. I get down some icing and I'm just making sure that the body and the head are touching, and I'm getting some of that vanilla chocolate chip filling in there, which is just my vanilla icing with some broken chocolate chips in there, and stick that part on top. And then I want to shave this excess cake off of here. So I have a serrated knife and I'm just trying to shave off the part of the 9-inch that's sticking out. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to be able to make this cake perfect with some icing. However, I just want to get rid of that excess cake that's sticking out just so I can get more of a rounded look to it. And now I'm just taking my spatula and removing any excess icing that is sticking out of the sides. And then this part I want to fill in with a little bit of icing so there's not such a big void. I'm trying to get it as smooth as possible. This really doesn't matter. We'll smooth it out as we add the icing, but I just am trying to even it out a little bit. And now I want to do the legs and the snout. So I am torting this 6-inch cake in half. And the part that has the top, that's the bottom section here. I'm going to set that aside for the snout. And then the top section, I'm going to take a serrated knife and cut it directly in half. And this is the perfect shape to attach to that back section of the body for the legs. So what I want to do is get a little bit of that chocolate chip filling on the inside of there and then press that against the side. And I'm doing that for both of the legs. And now I'm just want to take my spatula and just smooth this icing out. So I'm adding a little bit more icing where there are some voids, and I'm just trying to make it nice and even. And now I have these circle cutters and I'm holding it up against there. That looks like it's a little too big. I want to make the snout. And I made a 4-inch cake and it really wasn't baked that much. Like, I felt like it was underbaked. So I ended up using the 6-inch cake, and I'm cutting 2 of those circles out of here, hold them up against there. And I feel like that was a little too thick. So I'm torting this one in half, and I hope that makes sense. And you see how it's not sticking out as much? I feel like it looks better. So I'm getting a little bit of that filling down and pressing that down and then putting a little bit more in there so I can attach that other piece of the snout. And now I'm just taking the plastic that those cakes were wrapped in and just wrapping all of this cake up. So I'm making sure that I'm tucking it underneath so no cake is exposed. And I'm going to set this out at room temperature overnight just to settle. And this is the next day. So I need to add a crumb coat, and I am washing my hands. My hands are clean when I do this because I have to touch this cake. So now we're going to add the crumb coat, and the crumb coat does not have to be perfect. I'm getting a really thin layer of icing on here, and I'm making sure that I bring it down to the cake board and that I'm covering all the cake with it. You're still going to be able to see the cake through the crumb coat. That's okay. Our second coat will smooth everything out. But do you see how I'm trying to press it down in between where the head and the body meet? And then on the legs, like, you don't want to make it too thick. You want to keep the integrity of the shape of the cake. If you add too much icing, you're really going to lose the shape of the cake underneath. So this is just a really thin layer of icing. Once I have the body done, then I start on the head and do the same process. And just being really careful when I'm working with the snout because it has a lot of exposed cake there and I don't want to mess it up. So I'm just getting a really thin layer of icing on there. Now my hands are clean. Remember, I'm running my hands underneath really warm water and then using the water and my hands to smooth this out. I have found that using your hands is the easiest way to smooth the icing underneath sculpted cakes like this. And what you want to do is make sure that I'm not pressing my fingers in it too much. I'm kind of using the side of my hand. I don't want to have my finger marks all over it. I'm trying to keep it as smooth as possible. So using the palm of your hand is best, but in all of these areas, it's a little difficult to just use your palm. So you can kind of see finger marks as I run my hands over it, and then I go back and try to really smooth it out so you can't see a lot of finger lines. And I'm taking dry paper towels and I'm just removing all of that excess water that's on there. And I'm going to set that in the refrigerator for about 4 hours so it can solidify before I add the final coat of icing. Now, again, I'm scrubbing my hands. My hands are clean when I do this process. I got that out of the refrigerator. And again, that was in the fridge for like 4 hours. That icing is solid, and this layer is so much easier to add. So again, I'm doing a thin layer of icing all over the body and the head. And I don't want to have too thick of a layer. Like I said before, you want to make sure that you could still see the contours of the shape of the feet and the body and everything. So just another thin layer of icing around this whole thing. And again, once I have that entire second coat of icing on here, I'm running my hands under warm water and just smoothing this out. Trying not to use my fingers too much, trying to use my hand and not put fingerprints in there, if that makes any sense. I know my fingers are my hand, but you know what I mean. So I'm really not pressing down hard with my fingers. I'm just using my hand to smooth this all out. So I'm making sure that I stay with the contours of the cake and I don't like lose the shape of the cake. So I'm running my fingers through where the leg meets the body to make sure that you can still see it. You know, you can see where the neck and the body meet. So I'm just making sure that I smooth this all out. And again, taking a dry paper towel and just absorbing all of the water that is on the cake board. And then I'm going to put that back in the refrigerator for overnight, and then I will continue the process of covering it with fondant. So I got that out of the refrigerator, and I'm going to get a thin layer of piping gel on this entire thing. And then once I get the piping gel all the way, you want to make sure you get all the way to the bottom as well. I'm dipping my paintbrush in some water and just thinning out the piping gel. I feel like the fondant will stick a little better when it's a little wetter, and I didn't mean to rhyme. But anyway, making sure that you get all the way to the bottom of the cake board. So that's where the fondant is going to meet the board. You want to make sure that it's all the way down there. And again, I'm cleaning the board with a dry paper towel because I don't want the fondant to stick to the board. Now I have Tylose powder mixed into my fondant. I only use marshmallow fondant. I get the best result for marshmallow fondant. It's going to be stretchy, and this Tylose powder is going to stiffen it up a little bit and make it so much easier to work with. I have tons of videos showing you how to get your fondant to the correct consistency. I will link that in the description for you. So I sprinkled a little bit of that Tylose powder into this fondant, and I'm kneading it together. And this is 4 pounds of fondant. I made 2 batches of my marshmallow fondant for this, and I'm rolling it out about 1/4 of an inch thick and using my fondant smoother to smooth out any bubbles that formed when I was rolling it out. And then I am gently going to lift this up and place it on top of the cake. That might be one of the trickiest parts of doing this, is trying to make sure that you get it over the entire cake. I am taking my pizza cutter and just cutting off the excess so it's not hanging over, and then I'm just using my hands to smooth this out. So you want to pull it out and then smooth down the wrinkles. And I have a video where I go into detail on how I cover cakes with fondant, and I will link that below. But it's very important to work in small sections and smooth it out, and just be patient with it. This front part around the snout can get a little tricky, so I'm working in sections again, pulling it out and then smoothing it down. And I'm taking my fingers and kind of contouring it down where it meets the cake drum. And then what I like to do is take a piece of fondant dipped in cornstarch and use the fondant to smooth out the fondant. This will contour to the shape of the cake, so you can get into all these little creases and crevices. It's a little more difficult with a fondant smoother. Then I'm taking my Dresden tool and just pressing that down where it meets the cake drum, and then I'm holding my pizza cutter on an angle. I'm not cutting straight down. I'm leaving a little bit of that fondant sticking out. You don't want to cut your fondant too short. If you cut into it too much, then cake is going to be exposed and you can't go back from there. You can't add it back. So I like to cut it a little too big, and then I can always go back and refine it. Wherever I can't get into those little sections there, I'm going to use a smaller wheel cutter or an X-Acto knife just to remove this excess fondant. And now I have this big ball tool. I will link that below, and I want to make the little indents for the snout while the fondant is still soft. So I'm just eyeballing it and just pressing it in. I don't want to rip the fondant. I'm just making little indents there. And again, this time I need a little wet paper towel to clean off the cake drum. And I'm going to stick that back in the refrigerator. Now I got some kale and I have this fruit and vegetable wash and I'm spraying it all over the kale and rinsing this under water to remove any excess dirt or chemicals or whatever might have been on there. And I'm just setting these aside to dry before I put them on the cake. Now I have these circle cutters. I want to see how big I should make the eyes. So I like to hold it up to the cake and say that looked pretty good. I rolled that fondant out really thin. So I'm cutting 2 white circles and 2 pink circles. On the pink circles, I'm using a really big circle cutter to cut a little curve to it so that those will be the eyelids. And then I'm using a big piping tip to cut the pupils, get a little bit of water behind the eyelids and stick them down. And my nails are atrocious right now. I removed my nails and I'm trying to grow them out, so you got to bear with me. But anyway, I am putting down some water and just gluing them down. And then these are going to be those little white parts of the eyes and sticking those down using my paintbrush. Simple eyes. And now I want to cut little pieces off of the bottom so they contour to the nose, and get a little bit of water behind them and stick those down. Now I'm getting a little bit of black fondant in those voids that I made earlier and smoothing them out with my ball tool. And now I want to make a template for the ear. So I'm folding a piece of paper in half, cut it at the bottom, and then I'm starting on the outside and cutting in so I get like a little triangle shape. Going over to the pig, and that's way too big. So I'm making it a little bit smaller, holding it open and say that looks like it's pretty good, and I just want to curve it at the bottom so it can contour to the shape of the head, and that looks perfect. So I have my little template to make the ears. I want to make the tail, so I'm rolling out some pink fondant into a log and then cutting the bottom part, and I want to cut the top part on an angle so it comes to a point. And then I'm just going to take my paintbrush and wrap this around there so it comes to like a little curlicue, and I want to set it aside so it can dry to that little shape. And I made those ears, but I'm going to remake them. So I'm going to show you what I did. Those ears were too thin and they wouldn't hold up on the cake. So I ended up doing them a little differently. So I'm going to set the tail aside to dry. And then to make the ears, I'm rolling this fondant out so it's thicker at the bottom and thinner at the top. So the thicker part is going to be the bottom part of the ear where it's going to stick to the cake. That way it will hold its shape and not fall over. So do you see how it's thick at the bottom and thinner at the top? I did that for both of the ears. I'm just kind of rounding the edges. That way they'll be able to stand up. You'll see what I mean. So now I am making the pineapple. So I rolled out that yellow fondant kind of thick, and I'm using that one cutter, and I'm making 3 pineapple slices. And then I'm using a smaller circle cutter to cut out the center pieces. And then I have this tool and I'm making all these little indents in the pineapple. So I'm kind of going across and making sure they're lined up, and then I'm filling 2 in between those sections that I made. I hope that makes sense. I'm just trying to make it look as even as possible, and I will find this tool and link it below. I believe it came in a set. And then I'm using that tool to make some scratches on the inner details of those pineapples to make them look a little more realistic. And then I'm rolling this red fondant into a ball for cherries. I'm going to taper it at the bottom and then just indent it on the top a little bit so it looks like a cherry. And that looks good. I'm going to set those aside. Now I want to make the flower. So I rolled out fondant really thin, and I have this little cutter here. I will link that below, and I'm cutting out like 3 of each color, and I'm using my ball tool to remove it. I have this flower foam here, and I'm running the metal part of the ball tool over half of the fondant and half on that foam, just to thin out the edges of all of these. This is a little time consuming, but it makes them look so much better. And I'm crumpling up some aluminum foil and then going to lay it flat. And then I'm going to put the flowers on top of here so they dry with a curve to them and hold their shape. And I did that in many different colors. And look how pretty these look. I'm going to set these aside before I put them on the cake. Now I'm getting my cake out of the refrigerator, and I want to get these pineapple slices on here. So I'm doing 1 in the front and 2 in the back on the sides. And I want to make them look a little shiny. So I have some piping gel here because pineapple slices look shiny. So I'm just getting a really thin layer of piping gel on the top and on the sides of this all 3 of the pineapple slices. You want to make sure you get the sides as well. And then I'm going to get a little bit of piping gel underneath it so it can stick to the cake and gently put that down. And I did that for all 3 of the pineapple slices. And then for the cherries, I just got a little toothpick in the center of each one, and I'm sticking them in all 3 of the pineapple slices. And now for the ears, I'm getting a little bit of piping gel on the bottom thicker part of the ear and sticking it down. Now remember, this fondant has that Tylose powder mixed into it, so it's allowing the fondant to hold its shape. It is drooping over a little bit, but that's okay because I want the tops of the ears to curve in. But the Tylose powder allows it to hold its shape and not completely fall over. Now I'm getting a little bit of non-toxic glue along the outer edge of the cake drum. And I also got it on the back of this ribbon, and I'm wrapping this around here. Now, this is a piece, I think it's a 1/2 inch foam core board. I will link the foam core board below, and I covered it in aluminum foil, and I'm just wrapping this 5/8 inch ribbon around it. And now to put the kale down, I first want to put pieces of it down to see where I want it to go. Then I will glue it down to the board using piping gel. The stem there was a little too long, so I cut it off. So I'm just trying to arrange these so it contours to the pig. And I'm getting a little bit of piping gel underneath all of this kale just so it can stick down to the cake drum and up against the pig. And I'm just using my fingers and my paintbrush to press this down. And it's nice to have this kale at the bottom part. That way, if your bottom section of fondant where it touches the cake drum isn't perfect, this kind of hides any flaws. So I do like having these little accents here. It does help mask any flaws that you would have in your cake, and it makes it look so pretty and festive. Now, I cleaned these apples using that spray that I used before. I'm just wiping them dry. I think they look good there and there. So what I want to do, I have 2 toothpicks. I'm using some snips and just cutting the ends off, and then I'm hammering one down into the cake drum and then putting the apple on top. That way it's not going to roll off of the cake board, and I'm doing that for the other one as well. And now I want to put the flowers around the neck, so I'm getting some piping gel underneath. Do you see how I'm lifting up the petals so I can slide another one behind it? So I got some piping gel down, and I'm sliding the blue behind the pink, and then I'm going to slide the orange behind the blue. That way it kind of looks like it's a lei necklace. Without having to string them all together. And then once that's done, I took the excess flowers and just put them randomly around the pig and the cake board. And now I'm using my little ball tool to make a hole for the tail, and I'm smoothing that out. And then I can take that bottom part of the tail and stick that in. And since that dried, it's holding its shape. It has that Tylose powder in there, so it's not going to fall over. And now I have this icing bag with a tip number 2, and I'm adding these little centered details to the flower. So I'm doing one big one in the middle and then 6 around it. And I did that for all of the flowers. And here is your 3D pig roast cake. How cute is that?
So there you go. How cool is this cake? This one was so much fun to make, and I usually don't do carved cakes unless it's something like this that has the rounded top. I only had to shave off a little bit of the cake to get it in the correct shape. So it's not too difficult to carve. And like I said in the video, when you're adding the crumb coat and the icing and you're smoothing it out, that hides any imperfections in your carving. So the carving doesn't have to be precise. So it's a good design to do if you're just starting out with carving cakes. Now, to make this cake, I had to bake 2 9-inch layers, that half ball pan of the 8-inch and a half ball pan of the 6-inch, and 2 6-inch layers. So I will link those ball pans that I used in the description for you. And I also made that 4-inch cake, but it was too big for the snout. So I'm glad that I made an extra 6-inch cake. Something in me was just like, just make an extra one just in case I need it. And I ended up needing it anyway. So I'm glad that I did. Now you saw this cake on the inside. The body is a 2-layer 9-inch, not torted, with that 8-inch half ball on top. The face is a 1-layer 6-inch with a half 6-inch ball on top. And then the snout was just 2 circles that were cut out. And I had the 6-inch that was cut in half for the legs. It feeds about 40 to 50 people. And how much did I charge? This one was $600. So I think that's it. What new techniques did you learn in this video? I would love to know. Leave it in the comments below. And just a reminder, I have ebooks with all of the recipes that I use. I have my signature scratch pound cake recipes, my best doctored cake mix recipes, my buttercream icing and filling recipes, and my favorite numbers and my favorite fonts. So I will link all of those below. And I do have a Cake Academy membership program where I can help you elevate your cakes to the next level. There are 3 tiers to this program. The base tier is called the Cake Pop tier, and in that tier, you get free and discounted extras. Extras are those ebooks that I just mentioned, along with early access to my YouTube content and access to exclusive content that I make only for my Cake Academy members. And then the top 2 tiers all have those perks, plus access to my exclusive Facebook group. And in that group, I go live. I do little demonstrations on how to make fondant and how to do buttercream piping. We've had Zoom meetings on difficult customers and how to price your cakes. And we've done cake critiques. I post all of the pictures of the cakes that I make along with how much I charge. And we are having so much fun in this group. I would love to have you aboard. All that information is in the description. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you're enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is down below. And I would love it if you would keep in touch on socials, and you could check out my website. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. And remember, it's cake. Have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.